Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Amanda Baum. Welcome to the show, Amanda. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you. I'm still looking forward to it, Simon.
She's a great lady, fellow adoptee. Brilliant, Amanda, brilliant. So we were talking, Amanda is at home with a daughter, and she was like 3 minutes late to the Zoom, and she came on saying, I'm sorry, sorry I'm late, I'm being fashionably late. And I said, forget about it, it's 3 minutes. What sort of a numpty would I be if I couldn't give you 3 minutes? And then you shared a story about your from your dad, your adoptive dad, about how he made you see the importance of being punctual. Do you want to share that with the listeners?
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah, this is probably when I was 12 or 13, just that young age where you know everything. And I remember we were out in the yard just doing summer stuff, and we had an event we had to go to that my dad's company was hosting, and he was wanting us to get ready probably about 3 hours prior. And I went up to him jokingly and I said, "Dad, we can just be fashionably late." And he looked at me and he said, "There's no such thing." So then I went ahead and got ready, and it just really, like, there were different incidences in my life where he would try to instill in me the importance of being on time. And um and he would always say, I would rather be a half a minute um early than a half an hour early than a half a minute late. And I always thought, oh, that's so silly. Why not just be right on time? Or why not, 1 minute? Can't, he really wanted me to learn that. And then one time we were talking about such things, and he said to me, "Do you know how you can show that you really don't care about somebody?" And I had a very tender heart, and I believe I still do. And I looked at him and I was like, "How?" And he said, "Be late." He's like, "It shows you do not value them or their time." And that really struck a chord with me, because I feel like before it was just dad just giving lectures, and okay, yeah. But it really, like, as you say, that's when the penny dropped for me. That's when it just resonated in all of me, and I was deeply convicted. I feel in a good way, because it really opened my mind up to, yeah, I shouldn't be late. I mean,
Yeah,
I was never like insanely late, but I was, I'm so thankful that he kept persisting to bring that lesson until it did click, and I'm glad it did.
yeah. And I thought that was a great story, because the Thriving Adoptees podcasts, it is all about the moments that pennies drop. Okay, so it's more all about the insights that the guests have had on their healing journey. I'm trying to. I'm trying to. I'm not trying to. I am interviewing the guests. I'm interviewing the guests on their insights, in the hope that those insights catalyze insights amongst you, the listeners. That's what I'm trying to do. That is what I'm trying to do. That's my aim. Because I believe that insights change our world, right? So when the penny drops, when you used to, if you use three different words, you said the penny drops. You said what he said struck a chord with me, and that opened your mind up. So what we're trying to do on the podcast is open adoptees' minds up. And when we open our minds up, we're more curious. And when we're more curious, we learn more. And when we know better, we do better. So, and this all helps us along the healing journey, right? And the reason I say that is because those moments of insight are the ones that have changed my life. When I realized I was totally and utterly 1,000% wrong about the fact that my birth mother didn't love me enough to keep me, right? So when I saw that was totally untrue, that was a big leap on my learning curve.
Oh, wow.
That was
Yeah.
a big step on my learning curve. And it's the step that that's the easiest for the listener to grasp, or anybody I'm having a conversation with to grasp, because that's one of the fundamental challenges we have as adoptees. We think that we're unloved. We think that we're unlovable. So
for sure.
we came up with this idea of interviewing Amanda about her most significant penny dropping moments on her healing journey.
Yes. That, yeah, for sure. And I can provide one, or would you like, or do you have any
Sure,
ideas?
So what does one come to mind?
Yes, I mean, I was thinking about, like, when I first, I mean, this is, I feel like, for healing, realization has to come for healing, at least for me, right? Like, by that I mean, my first penny drop was when I was first told I was adopted, and that was when I was, oh, I had to have been 4 or 5, somewhere around that age, and I can still picture it, like, that's how much of an in that that's how much that time and space stood still for that moment. Like, I can picture my little self, and I was with my we were living in Utah, and I was with my best friend and her older sister, and we were just playing, and she suddenly looked at me, excuse me. She suddenly looked at me and said, "Do you know you're adopted?" And I was taken back. So I'm a transracial adoptee, so I don't look like my adoptive family. So, I mean, I knew something was different, but I had never put it together as I didn't belong. I just looked different, right? I never once considered I wasn't part of the family. I mean, I was, but I mean, I never considered that I wasn't genetically theirs. I don't think I had that capability, right? And so for me, that's when, like, everything stood still for a second, and I was like, "What does that mean?" And she said, "It means that your mom and dad aren't your real mom and dad." And I said, "Oh." So then I promptly went home, and it didn't upset me as much as it was just like if somebody told me the moon was really ricotta cheese. It just sort of like, "What?" And so I went home and I asked my mom, and I said, "Hey, am I really your daughter?" And she said, "What makes you ask that?" And I said, "Well, Becky said that I'm not, that I'm adopted." And at that time, I don't believe, I think she gave me the answer I thought I could handle, or maybe she didn't know. It was kind of on the fly for her too. So she said, and I said that you're not my real mom and dad. And so she simply said, "We are your real mom and dad." And then I just accepted it and moved forward. And I didn't think about it again until I think a couple years later. And I don't remember that incident as well, but similar incident happened. And I asked her again. And then she said, "Well, yes, we adopted you, but but that doesn't mean we're not your real parents." So then I tucked it away for a very long time then. But so I would say for me, that was the first real penny drop. It just sort of shifted everything, but I was so young. I didn't really understand what was being shifted.
Yeah.
So that was
So
sorry about that.
yeah, it's okay. I mean, this is real life.
I know, right?
Amanda's daughter's keen to get in on the show. There's a distinction there that I wanted to draw you to and just ask you about, because
Sure.
so you've did you say that you felt different but you were still part of the family? Is that how you felt?
Yeah, like I felt different in that, I mean, I could see I didn't look like any of my family. My adopted family is German and Scotch Irish, maybe Swiss by ancestry, right? So very fair, chestnut brown hair, and I am tan and have black hair. So I feel like I could tell there was a difference, but I didn't really think too much of it. Kind of like and brown eyes and blue eyes, right? You don't necessarily like, oh my gosh, you have brown eyes.
Right.
At least I did, like for me, it's like it's like I noticed it, but it didn't really. I
Yeah.
didn't feel alone in it, right? Because we had a lot of family there, so I was always with family.
So was it more about seeing a difference than feeling a difference then? Or is that too long? It's a while
Mm,
ago now. Is that am I being too pedantic, or I'm asking you to?
no, not at all. I think there's a lot of big, like at least for me, there was a lot of big things I didn't understand, and so I was the type that I just buried it, right? Um, so like skin color was one thing where I knew I looked different, but I didn't choose to dive down more because to me it just I, I don't think I wanted to know to some degree, right? Because all you do is you want to fit in, or at least all I wanted,
Yeah.
and also they got pregnant with a little girl while in the process of adopting me. So I mean, I realized also she also looked similar to them. So I knew I was different, but I didn't want it to be something that I'm trying to think because I was very young, so I don't know that I had such complex thoughts as much as
No,
that
no.
I was just different, but I was accepting it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think you bang on. You bang on
Mhm.
the money. When you said you didn't have such complex thoughts. Um, I've I think it was a transracial adoptee called Lucy Sheen who's told this to me. She's Asian origin, Hong Kong or Chinese. I should be able to remember, but I can't. But she was raised in the UK, in the south.
Oh.
And I think it was her that said that um, she she felt different. She
Mhm.
felt different. Um, she could see that she looked different, and she was treated differently as well by others, by by people outside the family. So
Ah.
this, so
Mhm.
those three things kind of became a um, it, three layers of difference.
Sorry.
Seeing, yeah,
Mhm.
three layers of difference. So instead of just one layer of difference, as like maybe a white guy like me, a white guy adopted by white parents, right? So we
Mhm.
kind of feel difference, but we haven't got the evidence. So
Ah.
the evidence grew. As Lucy explained it, the evidence grew for her,
Mhm.
and obviously that leads to the difference becomes it can kind of spiral into alienation. Like it grows, difference grows because our minds, all our minds, kind of latch onto things, and they
Mhm.
become like that. They become like what? Well, the way I've heard this expressed is what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. So if we've got an inkling of something.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, right, let's use it. Sometimes it's easier with the trivial example, right? So I got an inkling at 12 that I wasn't very good at woodwork, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and that inkling grew, and I didn't have the patience to stick. I didn't have the patience to stick with woodwork, and now I'm totally rubbish at DIY, and I've just kind of accepted it. Right? So but it's
Mm-hmm.
often easier to express these things, I think, with trivial matters, but it grows. So that's why I was asking you. But it doesn't sound like, because every experience is different. Every
Mm-hmm.
person is different. Every adoptee is different. Every transracial adoptee is different. And to me,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't sound that the difference lens. It sounds like Lucy's difference lens was a little bit stronger than
I
your lens. We're both wearing glasses,
mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
so if my glasses, my prescription is now 2, it was 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like, Lucy's difference lens was maybe a 3, and yours was more like a 1.5. It's
Yeah, I think definitely when I was younger it was that, because they I'd gone to a small Christian school which was um K through 12, and there were maybe 15 kids at the most. And so we were all very tight knit, and so nobody said anything to me, right? Where my so I went basically, let's say 1.5, because I also pretty much only spent time with family. We had a lot of family there and a lot of cousins, and it was very insulated, right? Like I didn't think twice. But then when we moved from Utah to Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia, which is a pretty big populated area. It wasn't in Philadelphia, but it was a suburb. Um, I think that's when I went from 1.5 to like 5. And so I don't know that was definitely not easy. Um, because I feel, uh, for me at least, I do wish my parents had the conversation like that. I feel like, yes, it's good to love your child, of course. But I do think that love itself is also preparing them for a world that will see them differently, so that they're not surprised. And I think that's what happened to me. And maybe it was maybe they didn't see it. Maybe they thought the world saw them like they saw me, I mean, I don't think it was malicious or anything, but I wasn't prepared to be seen as not white. Even though I didn't consciously think of myself as white, but I like a belonging to a group, right? To a specific group, let's say white Caucasian, that group. And so then when we moved to Philadelphia, I was very much made aware I was not in that group. Not I don't And I think the kids, they weren't really mean as much as they just didn't like little things were hard. Like, so another penny drop was like when my adoptive mom would come to here when she would come to like a meet parents can come in and watch their kids in class, right? They sit along the edges and just get to see you. And I remember being terribly embarrassed when she would come. It wasn't her fault, but I didn't know how to explain. Like I'd figured out that I should look more like them than I do. And I couldn't fix it, right? I couldn't make myself look more like them. And so I feel like that was another penny dropping, is that it's nothing I can do about this, right? And so I felt bad, because I'm pretty sure it did hurt her feelings, because I would act like I didn't know her, but it wasn't that I didn't love her. It was I had no idea how to explain such a complex situation.
Yeah.
So
So was this frustrating? Was this upsetting? What was, as this
um
feeling of difference or the difference goggles, the difference lenses as that was growing? How was that? Were you struggling with that? Or?
I believe I was. I didn't realize that that's because adoption was not talked about. I mean, even though it was obvious, we just never talked about it in the house. So I do think it was. I think it was internally, but I was like, the survival skills that they talk about. I think I was very much a berry, a freeze and berry. Like I just would not go there. I was talking to a friend once, and I said, when I think of my inner child, I think of like if you imagine like a just layers and layers of ice, right? And you see a little dot at the bottom, and that little dot is that little girl, And I've just resurrected all these layers so that I can keep her safe, and I don't have to think about it. I don't have to go there. And so I think I think it was hard, but it wasn't hard in the same time, right? Like because I wasn't dealing with it. So I think it made it seem like I was very resilient and or adapting beautifully, when in reality I just had all these uncertainties. And I can see where they played out in behavior patterns, not and like when I've read books about kids who endure trauma, a lot of those things I'm like, oh, look at that, But I didn't really deal with it. I've often thought, people say kids are so resilient, and my thought on that is resilient kids can, not always, but can make very broken adults. Because we didn't deal with it. We just kept it. We paddled enough without sinking, but we never actually just soared and built a boat and sailed across that water. This is just my opinion, by the way.
Yeah. Well, all opinions. That's what the show's about, opinions. As I say, I'm not a shrink, and most of the guests aren't shrinks either. We have the occasional shrink. So was there
I hope that answered.
Sorry, yeah. Was there when the layers of ice cracked open?
Honestly, there are moments when it cracked open, and then there's that pivotal moment where I realized that was what it was. Does that make sense? Like I can look at different times where it cracked, but I had buried it so deep I didn't recognize it for what it was. So that could be looking at behaviors of dropping friendships when I thought maybe it wasn't going to work out, like just trying to drop somebody before they drop me, if that makes sense. And I would say those are the ones that were not conscious. Like I didn't see that. But the moment, and another moment that was unconscious was when my daughter was born, which is very recent, right? That's within the last 4 years. And I heard a lot of adoptees say that, oh, when I had my first child, that was my first experience with genetic mirroring, and et cetera, I felt whole. For me, it was the opposite. And I think that's because I never dealt with anything, right? So it just suddenly, just really was quite frightening for me. And I love my daughter dearly, and I take, I believe, wonderful care for her, but it was hard. And so I don't, to answer your question fully, the first for me conscious one was actually my birthday. That was this past October. And it was the first time, because a lot of adoptees have said birthdays are hard for them. They've never been hard for me, except for the last time. And I literally consciously thought to myself, I wonder where I was this time when I was born. it was amazing. I'd never let my mind go there ever. And it was just, I don't know if it's from being around a, I don't know if it's from being around adoptees or if it's from doing some reading or the great friends that I've made, but I was thankful that it was a curious thought for me. It wasn't something that made me fearful or angry. I was just genuinely like, huh, I wasn't with, my parents, well, my adoptive parents at this moment. Where was I? Where was I the past 18 months? And it really, so I think that's the moment that it really, everything kind of clicked. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
So the pivotal moment the birth of your daughter, or was it another moment?
No, I think it was, I think the pivotal moment was, that's a good question, right? Because I think the birth of my daughter was so earth-shaking, but I still didn't quite connect it. But then my birthday, when it's like,
Birthday was.
it's when I started whether I realized it or not, whether it was subconscious, I started to heal from the bifurcation that had happened so young, from the splitting, right? I suddenly started wondering, oh, there's that other part of me. I wonder where I was. Right? I'm starting to become whole again, like, and not having to shut out that part. But now I want to be curious about it. Hope that
So
makes sense.
so yeah. So what's been, so we're recording this in February, listeners, and you said the birthday was October, so it's only like 5 months away. So 5 months previously. So what's been going on for you since then, Amanda?
I mean, I will confess that since I do have a young one, I'm not. I have done the ancestry DNA and all that, and I've only found fairly distant cousins, and I'm I'm very much aware there are ways you can dig deeper, but I do have a bit of hesitancy about that. Just I don't necessarily want to shake my foundation too much while I have a daughter that's so young. I want to be able to be fully present and not, because I have heard for some people, not for everybody, but for some people, reunion can be quite challenging and, you know, emotionally exhausting. And so for better or worse, right now, my choice is to recognize it, to sit beside it, but I'm not going to dig deeper, probably till she's in school, which is another couple of years.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think maybe make peace. Like, I don't know if my adoptive parents or my biological parents are alive or not. And 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 so I guess we'll just see what happens when I do that. But I do think I'm working on reintegrating in a way. I don't know if that's the right word, but um, I used to have a very hard relationship with Mexican Mexican restaurants because they would always go there saying, "This is your heritage," but I would just be like, "Ah," because all I wanted was to fit in, right? I wanted to be a typical American, whatever that means. That's what I wanted, and but now I'm going and I'm feeling like, you know what, this is my culture, this is my heritage. Because it's a weird thing, Simon, to feel like you're culturally appropriating your own culture. And that's kind of like how I felt because I wasn't raised in this culture, but my ancestry is in it, and it is okay for me to be curious. And it's equally okay for me to like, okay, so in America, a lot of I don't know why, but one stereotype is that, I hate to say word white, but everybody says that word. White women like pumpkin spice lattes. It's for whatever reason it's been a thing, and UGG boots, and I happen to like those things. And so it's like making peace with these bits of myself. Like, for me, to answer your question completely, I feel like for me it's I'm learning to be comfortable in that third space that's me, because I'm no longer uh indigenous Mexican who has the culture, who's been raised in it, who's come from a intact family. But I feel like I'm no longer just adopted Amanda. I'm somehow now a third space, in which I'm quite eager to discover and really not fight against things. Like, I feel like I would always, it's a big thing to fight against yourself, I think. And by that I mean to fight against our curiosities, like to fight against when somebody would want to speak Spanish to me and I'd be like, oh no, I don't speak Spanish, which I really didn't. But I also, like, it hit me to the core with guilt and shame that I didn't, even though I didn't, well, instead of just accepting, hey, that I didn't learn it because I wasn't in a place where I could learn it. And now I feel like I am. Now I'm curious to learn it and try to find friends who speak Spanish and be able to engage in that. Like, I feel like we said earlier, like a curiosity. I'm freeing myself to be curious. That to be curious about my genetic roots does not in any way compromise how I was raised. I mean, and I wasn't, ups and downs, right? So, but I can still like the things that I have experienced and come to enjoy while being in America. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you talked about guilt and shame.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting a big read that this has been huge for you. But is it something that's kind of like that's water under the bridge now, or was there a lot of pain around your guilt and shame, or was it just kind of?
Yeah, there's moments of it, right, for me, like that, like the moment of when my adoptive mom, and our relationship was rocky. I mean, that's a whole nother story. But I did feel shame that I knew all she wanted was for me to see her as her mom, and I did, but I just didn't know how to deal with everybody else not understanding it, like, and so I felt guilt and shame over that. I felt guilty, that shame that I didn't know how to explain it to people. I felt shame that I should even have to explain it to people. It's like when you're a transracial adopter, you have nowhere to hide for the most part. I mean, like a cashier could ask you, there is no passing, like
Yeah.
passing that, I just don't happen to look like them. So things like that, or things like, this is going to sound silly, but for me, it was when I was younger and dating people, one of the things they would say is, "Oh, I love your skin. It's such a beautiful shade of tan or brown or whatever." And I would get mad, like, inside, because that means they saw me as different, right? In my mind, that's what I'm telling myself. I'm again othered. When in reality, they were giving me a compliment, but I couldn't take it. You know? I didn't know how to take it because, you know what, Simon? Taking it would mean accepting myself, and I wasn't. I was not accepting myself,
Yeah.
you know?
So, was there a pivotal moment when the penny dropped and you did accept yourself?
Oh, I think that one is a work in progress.
Okay.
I think, I'm trying to accept myself because at the end of the day, I look how I look, and, um, but I I I I think it's just like, yeah, so I don't think I have completely, but I'm trying, you
Okay.
know?
You heard me say that. I don't know if you've heard me say this idea that um, we're not human beings having an a spiritual experience. We're one spiritual being having 8 billion different human experiences.
Yes, I really like that. I really like that expression.
Isn't that denying all color and racial differences?
I could see what you're saying, right? Like, because in some way, this is why I sometimes feel like it's a zero. Like, this is where for me trust comes into play, because to some degree there is no right answer. Like if somebody says, from at least in my opinion, right, from my experience, like if somebody said, as I am right now, oh, I love your beautiful tan skin, part of me would sort of cringe and be like, ugh, I've been othered again. Part of me, but at the same time, if they said, well, you're beautiful, but if you were just a little lighter, that would be better. That would be just as bad, right? So it's sort of like, if you notice or if you don't, or I don't see color. And I do understand that sentiment, like, because I could say that for some to some degree. To some degree, I don't, like, I may notice it, but I try not to put any stock in it, right? At the same time, but at the same time, because of depending on where one lives, it can make a very big difference on how you're treated. Um, that was one thing I wish my adoptive parents had told me, right? And that people will treat cats, not all. I've had far more for me, I've had far more positive experiences than negative in that regard. But I I feel like some people, just like everybody's different. Some people can't help but notice it, and some people don't notice it at all. Um, or for them it does, they don't put any weight on it. It's like, okay, she has tan skin, so what? What does she like? What does she like in personality? What is she, they want to know deeper. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think maybe that's just part of the human experience, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I before we started recording, we were talking about what other people say to us, and and this idea that I learned from a coach of mine this week, that if we're upset by what somebody else says, it can be that if well, it can be that there's a part of us that believes that too, or it can be it can be a conscious agreement, or it can be something that we are totally unconscious of, and those are really only the two options. If we just think, well, the guy's an idiot, then we ignore the comment, right? So I don't really know where I'm going with this. Let me just shift it round, and because as a white guy, adopted by white parents, I don't have the lived experience of this, but I can talk about my reaction to what other people say and what I found really useful. And so what I have picked up in lots of conversations with people on your side of the pond is that Americans seem to be a little bit more intrusive than Brits. A little bit more intrusive, like not just about racial issues, but generally speaking, you're just a little bit more, asking questions that maybe not particularly appropriate, wouldn't be deemed appropriate here in the UK. But one of the biggest things, I did a lot of work in elementary schools, and what what helped kids the most with dealing with bullies was for them to realize that although the bullies make it about us, it's really about what's going on for them. So their behavior comes from their feelings and thoughts, and our feelings come from our thoughts. So it's an inside job. They only ever come. Feelings come from us, not to us. So it's all about, like when I got badly bullied at scout camp, I'm not the most. I talked to you about earlier on about not being very good at DIY, right? So I'm not the most practical guy in the world, right? So when I made a mistake, the guy, the 14-year-old boy that was in charge of our tent, made me kneel on the ground and say, "I am a worthless piece of effing SH1T."
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So that was about what's going on for him. As I was 10, and nobody had told me that. Nobody had told me that. It was about what's going on for him. So I took it to heart. And when I explained to these kids these kids in elementary schools that our feelings only ever come from our thoughts, and whilst bullies make it about us, it's really about what's going on for them. That kind of that transformed a lot of their lives. They moved into that place where, you get me in front of a class of 30 kids for 40 minutes, and a third of them will play some silly games about feelings coming from thoughts, like juice comes from fruit. We'll play some silly games, but they will realize that the penny will drop for them, that their feelings only ever come from their thoughts, and our thoughts drive our feelings, and our feelings drive our behavior, whether that's us or the bully. So what's going on for the bully is something's going wrong for them internally. So they're expressing that. And let me give you an example. And I wouldn't call this bullying, but it was when when what was going on for me came out as violence towards somebody else, right? So I was on a school trip. I'd lost my rucksack, my backpack, as you would call them, and so I was late getting onto the bus, right? Because I'd been looking for it. So this is about we're back to punctuality, right? And as I
it all leads to punctuality.
as I walked on up the side of the middle of the coach, this kid, another Simon, he sneered at me about the fact that I'd lost my rucksack, right? And I just punched him. My anger led to my behavior. It wasn't because nobody had told me that feelings are an inside job.
Yeah, I'm just picturing little you going.
Yeah, and
that's.
And the teacher said, just because things are going wrong for you, there's no need to make them go wrong for other people. And that was the end of there was no punishment or anything like that, because they could see that the guy hadn't been, had been poking the bear, and the bear hit back. So I don't know what that's got to do with, but that I guess to say is that that what's going on. These feelings of ours are an inside job, and something's going on that's not quite right if people inside the heads of the people and the hearts of the people that are
Yeah, that's
racist.
very true. I remember a saying where somebody said, what somebody is thinking is none of your business. And I thought that was really interesting. And I kind of get what they were saying in regards to, we only have control of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I could exhaust myself to try to make somebody happy, but I can't, if they're, but there's, I might not be able to accomplish that because for them, it's their inside job, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's a hard lesson to learn for people pleasers. I'm not really, I mean, I can have people pleasing moments, but I was more, I don't know, I was just more beat to my own tune kind of deal, which it's good and bad, right? I mean, so with everything, there's a cost.
So you talked about reintegration. Is that is that the same as like the ending of guilt and shame? Do those two kind of things go together?
I think so, right? I think, at least for me, I think because I think because those things were keeping me from moving forward. That's why I think those two, at least for me, are related, right? I don't. Yes, I can say I didn't handle things the best I could in certain situations as a young child or even as a young adult, but now I feel now that my pennies dropped in a big way, right? Now I can do better, and now I see a bigger picture, and I can, instead of feeling overwhelmed by, let's say, poor behavior at a given moment, I can say, yeah, that wasn't the best decision. Let's learn from it and move on versus having it keep me there.
Yeah. Somebody told me on, I don't know if it was on a podcast recording or just another conversation I had with a fellow adoptee, said something from Brene Brown saying that the difference between guilt and shame. So guilt is about something, is feeling bad about something we've done. And shame is feeling bad about who we are.
I could see that. I like that.
It was a great distinction. And like, so we did I did a podcast with another transracial adoptee, Vin, from Australia, born in India, of Indian extraction, and we did a whole podcast on what gets in the way of loving ourselves. And for me, shame is the word, is the one word that the one feeling that sums up not loving ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, because if we can't really love ourselves, then it really, and have compassion, even more so, have compassion for ourselves, and how can we have it for other people? And I think that's where it can become hard, right? If you don't, because then you, if it's stopping being our own internal whipping boy, so to speak.
Yeah.
Stop, instead grow.
So in 3/4 of an hour, I'm doing a webinar on this, on loving ourselves, right? So that was.
You are.
Yeah.
Did you post it?
Sorry. Yeah. Well, I'm going to put a link in. I will put a link into I will put a link in the show notes to that, to the replay of that webinar.
Is it still open for people who want to go? Or is it full?
It won't be by now, because we're recording on the Friday the 3rd of February. So this isn't live. So this podcast will go live, I don't know, March time maybe. But listeners, there'll be a link. I'll put 2 links in the show notes, as well as all the links to Amanda and the great work that you're doing at Fireside Adoptees, right? Because
yes,
Amanda's one of the key players in the Fireside Adoptees group, one of the leaders. What do you call it? A leadership committee, is it? I can't remember what.
Yes. I founded Fireside Adoptees, and we have a leadership team, which I'm so proud of them. We work really hard to try to. Of course, my dog is barking.
Yeah.
We work really hard to try to be there for adoptees and be there for each other, right? As a team.
Yeah. So, what do you think gets in the way of us loving ourselves?
That's a good question. I think, what does get in the way? I can speak for me, right? I think for me, what gets in the way is, is not accepting the situation as it is, right? Like, for me, it was fighting against being adopted. I know that sounds ridiculous to fight against it, but if I'm fighting against it, that means I'm not accepting the situation. If I'm not accepting the situation, well, I am the product of the situation, meaning I am the reason why there is an adopted child in the family, so to speak. I mean, meaning my presence. So therefore, it's rejecting yourself. For me, it was. So the sooner I learn to accept myself, accept that I had nothing to do with being adopted. It wasn't my choice, but just to accept it and say, okay, what can I get out of this? How can this be a superpower instead of a broken leg, so to speak? And I think also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Superpower than broken leg. I love the clarity of that. The clarity of that metaphor. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, I just think that for me, a large part of it is forgiving myself that I spent so much time thinking I wasn't worthy or wasn't good enough. Forgiving myself for forgiving myself for being so abusive to myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, to do that, and then to just move forward. Just keep, even if it's just 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. Whatever that journey looks like.
Yeah.
Whatever that journey looks like, just being okay and not comparing other people's journeys. But and to allow myself, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos on Edith Ava Eger. She's a phenomenal psychologist and wrote a couple books. And I thought, and one thing that really struck me is she talks about how we have to allow ourselves to be angry at something in order to actually heal from it. And I think that was something that I had a hard time with anger. Like, I'm really great at being happy, or at least I feel like I am. I'm good at being happy and la 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 la. But when it comes to those more layered emotions, that anger, I at a situation, it's hard for me. And I don't know that I've ever really still been angry at adoption. Not, I mean, just angry that I had to be put in that situation. but then moving on from it, right? And so I think that's the thing I'm working on too, is like, it's okay to be angry at it, but and for me, and then also keep moving forward. So I'm looking at different ways to free me from me, so to speak, from the maladaptive me, right? And just embracing healthy ways of being.
Yeah. Wow. That's brilliant. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. For the Hey, Addie, sorry. Yeah, I would like to add that for the adoptees listening, just, you're not, I know it sounds cheesy, but you're not alone, and there are so many adoptee groups out there that you could reach out to, that people um are in a place where they can help you, they can be there for you. Um and and I think community is so important. And but also I want adoptees to know, we're not all the same. So you might encounter adoptees with different experiences, and that's okay. Um, we're also varied in our experiences, and then I would like to encourage, like, if there are any adoptive parents listening, I would encourage them to just, get in touch with other adoptive parents. You don't have to be alone either, and so many people out there want to try and be helpful. So yeah, that's really
Good,
what
yeah.
I want everybody to see, the superhero in them.
Would you like to call the episode that?
Sure, that sounds great, because I think at the end of the day, we have to be our own superhero, and the sooner we see that, the better.
Yeah.
I think that can be, not always, but that can be one of the benefits of an intact family that's healthy, is they're able to, from a healthy space, help their child see that and believe that.
Yeah. Cool. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Amanda. And I would echo Amanda's comments about community, and clearly Fireside Adoptees. I'm going to be on one of their chats next month, I think. They what really strikes me is about them is that this isn't just a cyberspace thing. That they kind of they know each other, right? It's got depth. It's got depth. It's got proper human connection, and a big and a very thought out, considerate team behind them. So it's got a lot more soul and warmth and acceptance. I mean, that's what strikes me as from the group. And it's a bit like Amanda was talking about moving from Utah to Pennsylvania, and it's a bit like going from elementary school to high school, or what we call primary school to secondary school in the UK, or the same as going from a village to a city. Everybody seems to be nicer in smaller groups, or get nastier in larger ones. It's something we can be, if we're lost in the crowd, and our behavior we can get away with, the human race gets away with behavior that it would never get away with in a small group. I'm thinking about football hooligans and things like that.
No,
when it's anonymous.
That's true. It's easy, especially when there's anonymity, versus when, like, you have more of that smaller human connections, like, oh yeah, we become real to each other, even though we obviously are real, but more and more dimensions are added, and yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Amanda. Thank you, listeners. And yeah, I'm gonna leave that thing in about the the feelings being an inside job. I realize it was a bit of a rabbit hole, but if you listen back to that, there's some actual real gems in there. As adults, kids find this super easy, but adults find it really, really difficult. But feelings are an inside job, and we're not choosing them most of the time, So this thing that Amanda says about being accepting our anger, not beating ourselves up because of our negative emotions, I think is huge. And as is realizing that they do come from us, not to us. Nobody can make us feel anyway. So thanks a lot, Amanda, and thank you, listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.